Greetings, the cows.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Mr. Fabian?
It is, yes.
Yes, sir. Greetings. I'm going to introduce the show and bring you right in, sir. Give me 30 seconds. Context of White Supremacy, Gus T. Renegade. I end up bringing another program to hopefully share constructive information on racism and hopefully share information that will allow us to establish justice as soon as possible. Thank you all for tuning into the program. And I definitely want to remind everyone, Cree, she has a program. She'll be talking about the exact same film we're discussing today on Sunday, this coming Sunday, December 20th. Her show will be broadcasting live at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So check it out. Hopefully you'll find the discussion very enjoyable and interesting, and then you can continue it on Sunday with Cree, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific this Sunday. Our guest today, you already heard, he is the producer and director of the film Skin. It's based on a true story, happened in South Africa. He is a graduate of the UCLA Film School. Pleasure to have him speaking with us live from the United Kingdom, Mr. Anthony Fabian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in. Pleasure to speak with you, sir. Could you share with our listeners just kind of a brief summary of who you are so they have a better idea of who Mr. Fabian is?
Gosh, that's a big question. I'm basically a filmmaker. I've been making films for the last 16 years, and before that I worked in the opera world for a few years, directing. And I first came across the story of Sandra Lang through an interview on BBC Radio 4 in the summer of 2000. And I had been making short films and documentaries and had been looking for a subject for my first feature film, and this one absolutely grabbed me by the throat, and I knew that it was a very powerful story that I wanted to share with as many people as possible.
Wow. I want to hop right into it. I have seen the film, fascinating story, and it's based on a true story, as he said. Before we get started, very important for our listeners who haven't seen you or not familiar with your work, you are a white male, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. If one needs to define these things in that way, I think the purpose of my film, in a way, is to suggest that you know, these questions of how you define yourself are perhaps a little bit more nebulous than people realize.
I would agree. I do, unfortunately, I have concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy, where these classifications are handed down by people who are higher than myself, who classify individuals as white and not white. The definition that I use for this system, for both racism and white supremacy, is a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you feel that such a system exists, and do you think that's...
Well, I mean, I'm sure it does exist, and by that definition, I would certainly not classify myself as white, because I wouldn't say that I fall into that category whatsoever. I fall into a category of humanists who believe that we're all bound together by our common humanity, and that these differences between us are, you know, interesting and not, you know, not either higher or lower on the scale. You know, we are all human beings. That's my vision of the world, and that's the message that I believe my film helps to promote.
I just wanted to make sure our listeners are clear, because that was not my definition for white. It was just my definition for racism and white supremacy.
I've got you on that one.
You did say that you are accepted as a white person, though. Is that correct?
I am. I am accepted as a white person, yes.
I am not, unfortunately.
Okay.
Again,
Well,
which is
good.
cause for a lot of problems because of racism, white supremacy. But hopefully we can correct that, and soon. I want
Yeah.
to hop right into your film so we can cover as much of that as possible. The story of Sandra Lang, you already shared with our listeners. You heard about this story through a BBC radio program.
That's right.
Can you kind of share with our listeners so they get an idea of Sandra Lang and what her story is all about? Uh-oh, Mr. Fabian? Uh-oh, did we lose you, Mr. Fabian? Are you still there? Uh-oh, I think we're having some technical difficulties. Mr. Fabian, if you are still there, we cannot hear you. Um, I don't know if hopefully if he's been disconnected, he'll give us a jingle back, and we can keep moving forward with the discussion. Let me double check and see if he's still on the line with us.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy?
Hello? 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 Hello?
Mr. Fabian? Okay,
Yes,
we got you back.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir. Got disconnected.
Yes, I'm very sorry about that.
No problem.
Where were we?
Give you summary, please, of Sandra Lang.
The story is essentially one. Sandra Lang was a black girl born to white-looking Afrikaner parents in Apartheid South Africa. So she was born in the 1950s to two people who belonged to the original Dutch settlers, the Afrikaners. And they had no idea they had black ancestry until she was born. Although, in fact, the history of South Africa is such that when the Dutch arrived 300 years ago, they arrived without their womenfolk, and there were many, many mixed-race children born as a result, who over the generations, many of them also had children with white people, and eventually you had basically an Afrikaner population which they believe has approximately 10% black blood. So even though people appear white, they have a lot of connection to the African ancestry. And in this case, this couple must have had enough black genes to contribute to produce a child who looked, very distinctly African. And although, of course, it put a lot of pressure on the mother and a lot of doubts about whether she'd been unfaithful to her husband and so on, they then had a child 10 years later who also looked mixed. And there's just no possibility that that wife, under those circumstances, having experienced what she experienced with Sandra, would have gone and had another affair with a black man if, she'd had one in the first place. So we are very sure that this was what is considered to be a genetic phenomenon called genetic throwback. And as I say, not as uncommon, particularly in that society, as you might expect. And similar instances of this have been found in the United States and in the South, with the history of slavery and a lot of mixed children being born from that, and also in the Caribbean and in Latin America, where there's considerable mixed populations. But in apartheid South Africa, this was a huge problem because the color of your skin determined everything about your fate. Where you went to school, who you could marry, what kind of bench you could sit on, what swimming pool you could swim in. It was a systematized, legalized system of racial inequality and white supremacy, if you like.
You pointed out that it was rumored. I just want to make sure I'm being accurate here. It was rumored, and some people suspected. I'm sure some people still suspect that Sandra Lang's white mother, Sandy Lang, that she had an affair with a non-white person. Some people did suspect that. Is that accurate?
Of course, yes. I mean, it's would be the natural assumption, but as I say. They did have a third child who also looked mixed, and she was not. This was not the kind of society where women generally, considered having affairs with black people. They didn't consider blacks to be equal to them. Therefore, although it had existed in the past, particularly because, as I said, the men arrived without their women, and of course there were affairs, and there have been affairs for generations and centuries between whites and blacks. By and large, and particularly within that community, and particularly within that social structure, it would have been considered reckless, to say the least, for her to have an affair with a black man. And I do not believe that she did, and against the law, of course. I think, she would have been, the fact that her husband believed her and accepted it, and especially after the birth of their third child, came to terms with it. I think we can lay to rest people's suspicions about that.
Okay. And you said that you don't believe she had an affair with a non-white person. You think she was
No, I do not.
Okay.
I do believe that she was faithful, and I met the woman before she died, and I believed her to be a racist herself, and I don't believe that she would have happily had an affair with a black man. I think it would not have been something she would have considered.
Why do you say that you believe her Sandra Lang's mother, Sandy Lang? Why do you believe that, or why did you say that she's a racist?
Yeah, the way she talked about white and black people, and the things that the nurses had said to me at the nursing home where she was staying. It was it was clear that she considered herself white and different, and
superior to
yes, I think so. And yet she did love and accept her daughter just as her father did, and I don't think either of them saw her as black. I think because she was their flesh and blood, she was just their daughter, and same with their youngest son. And that's, of course, the irony of racism, is that when you get to know somebody intimately, or even not so intimately, just, you get to know somebody as a human being, you stop seeing them in terms of their physical characteristics.
Again, for our listeners, Mr. Anthony Fabian, producer and director of the film Skin. One of the huge things, I guess, in watching your film and learning more about this story, I guess the thing that jumped out at me the most was violence, and the violence that was used and is still used to maintain the system of racism, white supremacy. You capture that violence just in an array of scenes throughout your film. Both when Sandra Lang, when she was in boarding school, and one of the young white children that she had spoken with was punched because she told another student that Sandra was not black, and another white student, bops her on the head. The Sandra Lang's father, Abraham Lang, him getting a gun, and not only threatening to kill the non-white person who ultimately fathered children with Sandra Lang, but eventually shooting at him several times. Can you talk about the violence that you came to know about in this story and the way you represented it in your film?
Well, it is a very violent society, and guns are a big part of that society. I suppose they were settlers, they were colonizers, and when they first arrived, guns were the one huge advantage that they had over the native population that was there, the Bushmen, San people. and it was how they had a physical advantage over them. And that culture, or that gun culture, which began in the 17th century, has continued, in fact, indeed in the 16th century, has continued to this day. And it's very much part of the Afrikaans culture, and all the violence that you see in South Africa today, where of course now black people have guns as well. Guns are a big part of the culture, and I know that there are white people who drive around with a gun in their glove compartment because they don't feel safe, and they want to be able to defend themselves. The idea of that is completely unthinkable to me, living in London, or I imagine in most parts of the United States, which is also very heavy gun culture. Nevertheless, people don't generally drive around with guns. But it is a part of South African and Afrikaans culture. And the other thing about that is that it's a very patriarchal society where the men feel the intense need to keep control and control over their families as well as the people around them. And there have been cases known where a father who feels that he's losing control will actually shoot his entire family and then kill himself. And this is not an unusual occurrence within an Afrikaans context. So it is a violent society, and it is a gun culture.
Wow. I just want to check the scenes of violence that are depicted in your film, Sandra Lang's father shooting at the father of her children, the incident that happened in the school, or I guess the several incidents. She was also beaten by one of her schoolmasters in the school. Was this, poetic license, or did these things really happen?
No, they really did happen. She was beaten by the teacher, and in fact she was then locked in a cupboard where she defecated, just out of sheer terror. So if anything, the film holds back a little bit on the true horror of what happened to her. And certainly her father did threaten to shoot Petrus, and I'm not sure whether he actually shot at him, but he certainly threatened to. And he also, that line where he says, "If I ever see them again, I will shoot them, and then myself." He did actually say that. That was direct quote from Sandra's mother.
Wow.
So that violence was definitely inherent in the story.
Wow. Again, UCLA film and TV school graduate, Mr. Anthony Fabian. One of the other huge things that really caught my attention in the film, not only the amount of pressure that was brought to bear on the entire family, especially Sandra Lang, and her being classified as white, reclassified as not white, classified as white, then her efforts to be reclassified as not white, just the psychological torture of all that. But Sandra's own torture at feeling like, she was causing so much of a problem. And you showed several scenes where she, one where her father is applying bleaching cream to her face, and then another where she, mixes up this horrible concoction of cleaners and everything and puts it on her skin. I guess, did these incidents really happen, and can you talk about how you represented that in the film?
Her mother did try to straighten her hair and burned her scalp.
Wow.
That's a memory that Sandra had. I'm not sure about the skin lightening cream, but we thought that just in terms of the visuals and the nature of the scene and so on, the skin lightening was perhaps a more effective way of showing that. And in terms of her applying the bleach, it was based on Sandra's own retelling of her own sense of feeling inadequate, feeling that she was causing problems for her family, and wanting desperately to do something about it, to change herself, to leave her skin behind. So it may not. I can't say hand on heart that the scene where she applied the bleach to her own skin really happened, but when Sandra herself has seen those scenes and the film, she feels that they are an accurate portrayal of her state of mind, of her state of being. So it's very truthful to the spirit of what she went through, even if in some instances, like that particular scene, you know, she may or may not have applied created that bleaching, but she certainly felt that way. She wanted to do it. And she also, it was a way for her to in some way take control, because so much of what happened to her as a child was about control being taken away from her. And I think one of the things that people admire about Sandra is that she did eventually take control over her life, and she did choose to live with a black man and to live in a black community and not in a white community, even though she was given the opportunity legally to remain in the white world. And I think that's something that you know, many people do feel was a great and courageous thing on her part.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I completely see the logic in a system where you're being heavily abused every day because you are not white, to get that classification. And I remember the scene where Sandra is reclassified as white, and her father, he looks like he's hit the lottery. He's so happy and just ecstatic about this. And I was thinking I would be too. I'm not even in South Africa. If I could be classified as white, oh, my life would be so much easier. For her to voluntarily say, no, I'm going to be with this black person, and I'm going to be reclassified as non-white. Do you think, because you show in your film, do you really think she would have been able, and particularly during so-called Apartheid South Africa, do you think she would have been able to exist in a white community there?
Absolutely not. I think what would have happened to her is that she would have been forced to stay with her family, perhaps help in the shop, and would not have had a fulfilled life of her own. She would not have been able to have her own family, her own children. I mean, this is a woman who has now had 5 children. She has 7 grandchildren. She has a home of her own. She has independence. None of this would have been possible for her if she had stayed with her parents and you know, and just agreed to you know, to remain with them. I don't think anyone would have married her. I think it was very clear from those boys who took her out that they did not respect her, and she didn't feel comfortable with them, and white people did not make her feel welcome. And she needed to be somewhere where she felt accepted and loved. And, you know, she was strong enough to make that happen.
Wow. Wow. I think anyone who has been listening to this program, they've heard so-called interracial relationships come up a lot in discussions of racism. And it's my view that they should not happen as long as the system of white supremacy is in place. The non-white person is being taken advantage of. And really, one of my areas of research, I've looked at non-white people who have white parents, exactly Sandra Lang's situation. In my research, what I have found is that non-white people who have white parents, their white parents have made absolutely no effort to assist them in understanding racism, combating racism, educating them as to how it works, or really doing anything to really help them deal with how they're going to be mistreated as a non-white person. And when I watched your film, I saw that play out again, where I really didn't see where her parents, even though they seemed to show a lot of concern and genuine love for her, they really didn't do a lot to educate her about the system of apartheid, white supremacy in South Africa. And they really didn't seem like, hey, we got somebody who's going to be brutalized by this system. We should be zealots about, hey, apartheid needs to go. This is incorrect. This is unjust. And I didn't see that. Can you share your view on that?
You're right. They did not achieve any enlightenment about how wrong their system was by what happened to them, despite what happened to them. They continue to support and believe in the system. They wanted to protect their daughter, but they went about it in a completely wrong-headed way. And I think part of the problem was that they themselves were perhaps afraid of being judged as non-white, because if they produce a child who's non-white, that potentially means that they're carrying black genes, which means that they're potentially black themselves. Maybe they will be stripped of privileges as well, which is not something that I think they would have been very happy about. So I think they had to maintain this illusion that everyone in that family, including Sandra, was white. And that meant that they weren't able to, they didn't allow themselves to gain any insight about the system being wrong. And it is one of the ironies of the story. But just to pick up on something that you said, I have a number of friends who are from mixed couples, children of mixed couples. And in most instances, because their parents are mixed, their black parent does prepare them for the way that the world might see them, might view them. And even though they have one white parent and one black parent, those parents are quite careful to make it clear to those children that they will be perceived of as black, essentially, in the world. And if you read Barack Obama's memoirs, he also goes through the same process of trying to establish his identity and who he is, where he belongs, who his people are. And I think the choice that he made to marry a black woman and to essentially identify as black, was a very clear one. But it could have gone a different way. Many children who come from mixed backgrounds choose to marry white people, not black people.
I just want to point that out. You said the individuals that you know who come from mixed background, you said their black parent does make an effort to inform them of how they will be treated.
That's right. And that's why, as you say, these two white parents perhaps wouldn't have had the experience, the knowledge, the insight to be able to pass that on to Sandra.
That's where I disagree. Now, I'm real certain, as you said, her white parents, maybe they didn't go that route because they were afraid that they would be reclassified as non-white. It's my view that white people are very informed about the difference between being white and non-white in a system of white supremacy.
I meant whether they would be able to prepare her for how people would treat her, because they didn't want her to be treated differently. They wanted her to be treated the same as them. She was their child, their flesh and blood. And yet, as you say, it didn't give them any insight into the injustices of their society. And indeed, I think the really sad thing is that Sandra's younger brother, who's also mixed, is the one who more violently wants nothing to do with her, and who utterly rejects her. And he's married to a white woman, lives in a white community, and feels threatened by the connection to his black sister, because he feels that he's somehow passing for white and living and is being accepted as white, although he's not. I mean, people can see very plainly that he's mixed. But he's living, in a way, the same delusion that Sandra's parents were living, except that, in his case, he's very clearly and visibly not white.
Wow. That sounds like a whole other story to follow his life.
It certainly is. It certainly is, and that's going to play itself out, I think, very clearly in the media in the next couple of months, because the film is going to be released in South Africa at the end of January. And I think there's going to be a great outcry about the brother's refusal to reunite with her. And there's going to be a lot of column inches devoted to the rights and wrongs and the hows and whys and wherefores of that situation. And I think already the older brother has begun to feel some of the pressure of the media. I think he's been reading some of the things that have been written about the film, and he's now starting to make overtures to reunite with Sandra. But the younger brother still utterly refuses.
Wow. Again, Mr. Anthony Fabian, director and producer of the film Skin. I do want to make sure I clarify. I think you said that the white people, they perhaps don't have the knowledge to pass on to a non-white child about, how you're going to be mistreated and some skills for dealing with that. I think even passing on the knowledge of, hey, we're in a system of racism, and these are the implications of that for your life as a non-white person. I think any white person could easily pass that information on. Her parents clearly had knowledge of how to deal with someone who is white and how to deal with someone who is not white. That in and of itself would be a wealth of information.
The scene where Sandra is discovered to have been with Petrus, and her father comes in with a gun, as usual, and her mother then speaks to her afterwards and says, okay, what's going on? And Sandra says, I like Petrus as a boyfriend. And her mother slaps her on the face. And she says, she has a little speech there which I think encapsulates what you're saying. She says, you can't help what you were born with, but you can help what you become. She says that for a start. That's the last line that she said. She also says, Petrus is a black man, dirt in this country. Right?
Wow.
So she's very, very aware of the choices that she feels the choices that Sandra has in front of her. She's saying, if you choose this man, your privileges, everything about your life will be taken away from you because black people are dirt in this country. And so she's saying to her, you can't help what you're born with, but you can help what you become. So she's saying, be careful about how and what choices you make. I think she feels we decided that there were 3 different positions in that family, that the father felt she was an Afrikaner, she had to marry an Afrikaans boy and live as an Afrikaner, and that was that. Her mother acknowledged that Sandra was different and felt that the solution was maybe for her to leave the country or marry a foreign boy who wouldn't have the same attitudes as the Afrikaans people did. So she saw a way out for Sandra that wasn't necessarily going to be to embrace her black identity, but to marry somebody who was not part of their culture and community or leave the country. And Sandra herself had other ideas. She decided that she needed to go where she felt loved and accepted, and that was in the black community, where she'd always felt much more welcome and much more comfortable, right from her earliest days of having black friends and, her black maid, and she was just more comfortable, as she said, with the kitchen staff than she was with her own family.
Wow. I had some other questions, but I definitely want to make sure that I get this in. There are a lot of stories where I've seen where white people will go investigate a serious incident of racism, but as is the case with Miss Sandra Lang. And they'll do a lot of hand-wringing, and they will really make an effort to show just the horrors that this non-white person has experienced because of racism, white supremacy, but there's no real change. That non-white person, their story gets told, but there's no real change in that person's quality of life. And I did want to make sure that I shared, at least with you and what happened with this story, your efforts were able to have a direct impact on improving Sandra Lang's quality of life. Can you talk about what assistance you've been able to provide for Sandra Lang as a result of your work?
Well, I certainly felt in taking on this story that I had to do something about the person at the center of it. It wasn't just a matter of going in there and using her story and taking advantage of that. And I could see that even though her story had been in the media for 30 years, there hadn't really been any long-term benefit to her. She was still living in abject poverty in a rented house, which was just 2 rooms with, 3 children at that time living at home with her husband, and barely able to pay for the school fees or the books or clothes for the winter for her children. And I mean, that just felt that was an injustice that needed to be made right almost immediately, because her situation was as it was through no fault of her own. Her white family had prospered, and simply because of the color of her skin and the terrible things that she had to undergo, she was in a very tough situation. And I mean, again, as a human being, I don't think you can look at that and simply ignore it and take from it. So I was very lucky that quite early on in the process, after I acquired the rights to tell her story, I sold the publication rights to Miramax Books, which and I negotiated quite a substantial advance for that book, which was to have her biography written and published. And that money went directly to her so that she was able to buy her first home and have some income. And then when the film was made, she received a further sum of money, and subsequently there's been a documentary that was made, and again I negotiated a fee for her. And I think she's now in a position where, her home has, I think, tripled in value since she bought it. She's in a much more secure financial situation. She did open a shop, which we helped her do, and unfortunately the street where she was living was rezoned because there was a local shopping mall that was opened, and they insisted all the little businesses closed down. So that was unfortunate. But she's a grandmother now, and she just wants some peace. And she also has 5 children who I believe should take over where I left off, and should be able to look after her and take care of her as well. So she's certainly not only much better off financially, but also emotionally. I think being able to share her story with people has made a huge difference to her. And the fact that she's had standing ovations in festivals from Toronto to Dubai to Los Angeles. We also showed the film at the United Nations headquarters, and a room full of 600 delegates and ambassadors all stood up and gave her a standing ovation. We showed the film at the South African Parliament. The same thing happened again. And, people consider her something of a hero of the struggle, for sharing her story and for enlightening people all over the world. And that's made a tremendous difference to her sense of self, to her confidence, to her well-being. So she's certainly somebody who I think is a lot happier, and a lot happier in her skin than she was when I first met her.
Wow. Yeah, that real difference in a lot of the other stories, and there are tons of these. I mean, this is not the first time I've seen a story where a white person goes to investigate a non-white person who is a victim of racism, and he does a documentary on it, or does a film docudrama based on their experiences. But generally, I don't see where there's some tangible improvement in that non-white person's quality of life. And I would really say that's what we should all be doing. It's nice to be able to go and get the applause and everything and have that notoriety, but I really think we should all be working to solve problems where the non-white person who's been brutalized is not in the same position of abject poverty and suffering when the film ends, the lights are off, and the crowd is gone. They should have a definite improvement in their quality of life, and it really surprised me. I was really kind of stunned that she actually.
I couldn't agree more with you. Yeah, I mean, that to me that was just basic, and I don't think I could have looked myself in the face, if I had done it any other way. I think that's just a normal human response to a situation, and I was very moved by her story, and I felt that a terrific wrong had been done to her, and that somehow, somewhere, someone had to make some kind of reparation, even if I wasn't directly responsible for that. I did feel that something had to be done, and I'm hoping that other people will, perhaps think to do the same.
I would hope so. I really consider it when that does not happen, when that non-white person's quality of life is not improved, I really feel like that is really one of the lowest forms of racism, white supremacy being practiced, where we're further exploiting racism. By now, we can just go tell a story and we'll feel bad and kind of clear our conscience about all this and make some money, most likely. And the non-white person is still left suffering after it's all over. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that did not happen here.
Great. Well, I'm pleased. But as I say, I think to me it's a kind of it's a natural thing to do, and I'm very lucky that I didn't have to be deprived of a decent education, or that basically I had possibilities, and that's given me the wherewithal to bring this story to the screen and to make a difference to Sandra's life. And I think if you're lucky and have been blessed with certain advantages like that, I think it's very good to be able to share them and to spread your good fortune.
Solving problems, I dig it. I want to make sure before things wrap up, if you would like to call in to ask Mr. Fabian a question, 347-215-6071. We can see if we can get a question or two before we wrap up. I did want to touch because when I watched the film, I felt really bad when I got to the end and I saw the credits going up, and you kind of update, how these folks are doing at the time the film was finished. Beatrice, the black male who fathered 2 children with Sandra Lang, was reported that he died in a brawl, and I just I felt like, no doubt, Sandra Lang, victim of white supremacy. She suffered a ton of abuse. But Beatrice, that was a pretty crushing blow. This guy, he was shot at, he was threatened, he lost his business, lost everything, lost his wife, and then dies in a brawl. Everything about, even though he abused Sandra, which is totally incorrect, I felt like even that was a manifestation of apartheid white supremacy, where the people who are getting abused just end up abusing one another. Can you kind of share, your feelings about Beatrice?
I fully agree with you, and I think really he was the true victim of apartheid. And to some extent, Abraham Lang, who also died without being able to achieve reconciliation or forgiveness with his daughter, also suffered. But Beatrice is definitely the real victim. He didn't have the strength, and maybe because he didn't have, whatever it was that Sandra's parents were able to give to her to see her through, when she says at the end, her father's words, never give up, that was something that helped her through it. That's not something that he was brought up with. And I think really, of course, everything in the film is true, including the abuse, including the drunkenness, including the fact that he died that way. But it's really exemplifies, I think he is symbolic of so many black men in that country whose spirit was crushed because they tried to do something, establish their own businesses, create their own communities, create their own homes, and those were destroyed by unfeeling and absolutely callous people who were, in the case of that village, was destroyed because they'd found coal in the area and they wanted to be able to exploit that, regardless of what it might do to the people who were living there. And they didn't have any consideration for them and their community. And some people like Beatrice, it just broke his spirit. Beatrice's mother, I might add, is 90 years old. She's still alive. And she's still Sandra's, spiritual mother, and they spend a lot of time together, and she looks after her, and Sandra looks after her, and they remain very, very close. And I think that's one of the heartwarming aspects of the story, is that she perhaps lost one mother but regained another, and remains very, very close to her.
Yeah, I felt like you even captured a bit of that. After they crushed the store and everything, they crushed the store, the home, everything, and their Beatrice is sitting around the fire, and he says, they tell us, and he's just commenting that we're not humans. We're not even people. They just
That's right.
kind of take everything away from us. He kind of takes that out on Sandra, but I felt that total just
well,
his
yeah, he
entire
relates.
spirit is crushed.
Yeah, at that moment, he sees her as part of the system, the white system. If he identifies her with her white parents and sees her in some way as white, he then identifies her with the people who destroyed his world. And that is part of the problem.
Wow. Again, Mr. Anthony Fabian, there was a scene towards the end of the film when Sandra goes to see her mother for the first time. She hasn't seen her, I think, in some 20 years or so. She's in the hospital at that point, and her mother tells her to go to the closet. She has something in storage for her. She said she kind of hid it away because her father burned and destroyed everything that was connected to Sandra, and it was a white doll, and it was kind of a tough moment. It was kind of revolting on one end, and it was. I mean, it did show that connection that was the doll she had from childhood, but it was kind of revolting to have that be the special thing that got saved. A blue-eyed, white-haired, blonde-hair, blue-eyed doll. Can you kind of?
I hate to tell you, but that doll really did exist, and she really was called Melinda, and she did have blonde, cascading curls, and I'm afraid that's all true. And I think really, rather than thinking of it in terms of whether the doll, I think there's an irony about it in her childhood, which is very, very strong, and you get that sense of how strange and strong that irony is. Of course, in the 1960s. I don't think there were any black dolls. Even in the United States, Black Barbie and black dolls came in quite a lot later when people started to realize the kind of identity issues involved in those toys. But in terms of what she rescues, I mean, I think it was something that I think registers very strongly in people's minds early in the story. When she goes to the school and she puts the doll in her bed, and then the doll is there in her bedroom, when you see it. And so you identify it with that time of their relationship, and also I think the doll is with her when they come back from the river, and she's photographed with the doll by the press. I think you just identify that doll as part of her childhood, her innocence, and her relationship with her mother. And the schism, the identity schism between her and her world. And so I think I can understand your sense of revulsion about it, but at the same time, it's really more about the nostalgia for the time when she and her mother had a real relationship, before everything went wrong. More than a symbol of her harking back to her whiteness or her white childhood, or her white identity.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be an either or. I kind of felt both. I definitely felt what you were speaking about. Definitely.
I understand. Yeah. But it does have an emotional impact on people, when they see that doll. No question.
I also wanted to check. You said that you definitely felt Pietra's victim for sure, victim of racism, white supremacy. You also said Sandra Lang's father, Abraham Lang, was a victim. Do you think he is a racist? Let's say that first. I think he's passed away now, but do you think he was a racist?
I definitely do think he was a racist, and I tried to find subtle ways as well as not so subtle ways when he comes back from the school where he's told the teacher that Sandra, they just need to get used to her and everything will be fine. And he comes back into the shop and he says to his wife, "Why do you talk to them? Just sell to them. That's all you have to do." And then he later doesn't touch the hand of the customer who he's just served.
Yes,
yeah. I think it's very clear that he is a racist. And that's another of the reasons why he can't accept Sandra as she is, and needs her to maintain the same illusion that he has, that she's somehow white.
You did reference him as a victim, though. You think he's a victim? How is he a victim?
I think he's a victim because any system that brainwashes white people into thinking that they are better than black people, and anyone who has been subjected to that, I feel sorry for people who have been subjected to that brainwashing, just as I feel sorry for people who are brainwashed by Scientology or, any sort of cult, where somehow their ability to think rationally and to think in a more intelligent and individual way about human beings and their place in the world is somehow taken away. And I think he was a victim of his own brainwashing and of a society that he was a part of that prevented him not only from seeing things as they were, but of actually being able to express remorse and forgiveness when he'd done something wrong. And he knew by the end that he had done something wrong and that he'd caused enormous damage. And by then it was too late. The damage was done, and his wife was not going to give him the satisfaction of salving his conscience, because she felt that she had also in some way been a party to that. And so, yes, I mean, he was wrong and he was a racist, but I do think that his racism came from that society and his inability to see outside of it, and just as, Petrus blamed Sandra because he was not able to see outside of his own situation either.
We had 786 called in with a question. 786, do you have a question for Mr. Fabian?
Yes, sir. I would like to know how does a white person brainwashed into practicing racism, white supremacy?
Well, in my film, there's a scene at school where the teacher is holding up cards of white people and black people and telling the children, what the difference is between whites and blacks in a very sort of narrow and chilling way. And this is a scene that was taken from the national curriculum in South Africa in the 1960s. It was actually part of the teaching. And, when you start with children as young as 6 and start telling them that black people work in the fields and white people are doctors and nurses, that's the beginning of the brainwashing process. And it goes right through not only the classroom but the church, and the whole community was basically set up to instill a way of thinking in people, really from the time that they're born practically, and instill in them a sense of supremacy and a sense of empowerment. And so that's what I mean by the brainwashing.
So does this practice, do you think is a global practice that takes place?
Well, that's a very extreme example of it, and one which thankfully no longer exists in South Africa. I think it exists in subtle forms in many countries, and I think that racism is an insidious and ever-present thing which it seems extremely difficult to eradicate in almost every society, because our need to identify with a certain tribe, whether it's the white tribe or the black tribe or Christians or Muslims, or there's this need for identity and belonging is so strong in people, and that it tends to lead to an equal need to exclude people who are not part of your group. And I think we somehow need to work against those instincts in being much more embracing of all people, all cultures, all races, and so we need to somehow do the opposite, if you like, which is to teach people more about how similar we are as human beings rather than how different we are.
What do you think white people who identify themselves as white should do in reference to other white people or people who identify themselves as white and function as white should do in order to destroy the system of racism and white supremacy?
Well, I think education is a huge part of that. I think the more people learn about, for instance, genetics, and that race is not a biological construct, it's a social construct. There is no biological difference between white people and black people. There's the tiniest differences in certain genes that make our skin color one way or another, or our features one way or another, but biologically these differences are negligible. And so what we need to do, everyone, white, black, brown, Chinese, everyone needs to be educated to understand that race is a social, not a biological construct, and that therefore we need to start by understanding our common humanity rather than our differences, as I say. And beyond that, there are differences in culture which are quite different from racial differences, and I think those cultural differences are really, I think, the principal thing that stands in the way of us being able to understand one another. And so the more we understand each other's cultures, the more accepting and tolerant we become of each other's cultures, the more likely it is that racism will eventually go away. But we're a long way from that. I think the presence of your president should help to spark some of this debate, and certainly, I as a filmmaker telling this story, I'm hoping that this will also help to spark the debate and get people talking about it, because it's very, very important that we talk about these things and don't pretend that they aren't there. But I myself have struggled enormously to have support for my film to have maximum exposure. I haven't had the support of mainstream distribution. Every aspect of trying to get the film out there and the messages of the film out there has been extremely tough, because I think there isn't a general sense yet that these things need to be tackled, and that films like Skin help begin the debate and help raise these questions and help, as you say, if not find the solutions, at least bring up the questions of how we can stop racism from happening.
Thank you, 786. We were doing 1 hour. We had one caller. Do you have 30 seconds to take one final question before we wrap up, or?
I'll give you one more minute, yes, and then I've got to dash.
Okie doke. Here we go. 951. Did you have a final question for Mr. Fabian?
Appreciate your time, Mr. Fabian. Yeah, I was just listening.
Oh, okay. Outstanding. Do you think the resistance that you've had from mainstream, from your film being taken into more mainstream avenues and distribution, do you think that is because of racism, white supremacy?
Well, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I'm sure that they would say it's because my film would not appeal to a wider audience. I personally believe that it would appeal to a very wide audience if it had that kind of backing. So it becomes a little bit of a vicious circle. What comes first, the backing or the popularity? There are many black people in the United States who have enormous wealth and power and influence. some of those people might have been able to step up and make a difference. I'm hoping to get that kind of support, because if it's not coming from the white community, maybe it'll come from the black community. But as yet that hasn't happened. And so I live in hope that if the film really does have a role to play, and can make a difference and can raise these debates, that it'll find its support eventually. But it has been very tough. And I think, to answer your question, yes, I do think that racism has something to answer. And I've been told very clearly and very with great certainty that the fact that my film deals with black people and race issues is a deterrent to audiences, and I don't believe that's the case. I believe the only deterrent is that people don't know about it, because we haven't had the advertising dollars for everyone to know.
Wow. Again, Mr. Anthony Fabian, director and producer of Skin, real pleasure to have you on the program. I think it was very interesting to get more information about this film. I hope lots of people are able to check it out and ask some questions and think about what's presented in your work. I want to thank you for sharing some of your time with us this morning, Mr. Fabian.
It's a great pleasure, and I do hope that many people will get a chance to explore it and that the debate can continue.
Outstanding. Again, Mr. Anthony Fabian, director and producer of Skin, thank you so much for spending your time with us, and we will definitely be in touch soon, sir. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. If you're on the line, you can hang tight if you would like to share a question or comment about what you heard. We'll take a quick commercial and be right back.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Peace, family. This is your brother, Holla, a.k.a. Mr. Holipsis, a.k.a. the Buzz Killer. Tune in to Holipsism's Haven every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we discuss the social, economic, and political issues of the day with a common-sense approach, an African-centered perspective, and a universal sensibility. Call-in number 347-843-4874. That's 347-843-4874. To check out related YouTube videos, blogs, and show archives, visit www.holipsism.com. That's www.holipsism.com. I'm making it hard to get your Negro on. Hotep, Black Power.
There's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it
Context of white supremacy, Gus T. Renegade, and Justice. Justice not in for this episode. I did not forget her. She is out doing constructive things, but hopefully we'll have her back for tomorrow's program. Tomorrow we'll be back with Mr. William Pepper. He is the author of Act of State. He was an attorney for the 1999 trial into the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. He will be here tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central. Mr. William Pepper. That will be tomorrow, December 17th. I did want to comment really quickly. A lot of people, the last program, commented that the times were posting incorrectly for the show here at Blog Talk. I logged on today at Blog Talk, and the show was posting an hour late. It was showing 11 a.m. Pacific, and the show actually came on at 10 p.m. Pacific today. I contacted the folks at Blog Talk Radio, and I informed them that my listeners had said this had happened for other shows and that I had experienced it myself. Could they assist with the problem? They told me to check my own settings for when I entered, in terms of the information that I entered for when the program was supposed to start, and to check my settings to make sure that I had my time zone entered correctly. I checked all of that. All of it was fine, and I reminded them that multiple listeners in several different time zones had all experienced the same thing, where the show was posting an incorrect start time. They said that this was not possible. If everything has been entered correctly, this is not possible. He asked that I send a link for today's program, and he would check on it, but he said that is not possible, which is incorrect because it is possible. I went online, and it was showing an hour off from the correct time that it's supposed to post. So I have been checking on that. Hopefully we'll get that cleared up so that it doesn't happen anymore. But folks who said they saw it this past Sunday with Charles Mills, the show posting an incorrect time, I saw it happen today as well. And actually the show tomorrow with William Pepper was also showing an incorrect time. So I suspect it could be racist activity. I don't know, but I will keep you posted as I get more information about that. Again, I want to remind everybody, Cree 7, counter-racist evolving engineer, she has a program that will be dealing with this film. It will be this Sunday, December 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. She will have British film reviewer Nathan Koblenitz. They will be talking about a lot of the same issues that we discussed today. Make sure you support her program if you found it interesting. I think they'll have a full 2 hours devoted to this film. So please check her program out this Sunday. Again, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, 10 a.m. Pacific, counter-racist evolving engineer. If you're listening at Blog Talk Radio, that program is linked in the description for this show. Just click her name and bang, it'll take you right to it. 786 and 951 is Back of the Bus. 786 and Back of the Bus, you are both live on the air. Did you have any comments that you would like to share about today's program or anything else racism related?
Yes, 786 here. I based on the question that I was asking earlier, I just made a personal observation, and maybe some of the other non-white listeners were listening in on it too when I asked the question about white people and their so-called counter-racist activities that they carry on with one another, and as far as is that a viable idea? And normally, and I've been consistent listening to your program, and it holds true for the most part, that normally when that question is asked, it doesn't become any definitive results of whites and how they focus with non-whites on destroying the system of racism and white supremacy. They all of a sudden want to get universal with their interactions on counter-racism, as opposed to them focusing amongst themselves to render the system of racism and white supremacy ineffective or destroyed altogether.
Mm.
It's an observation on that I normally have heard on your program, or there's no activity at all on their part. For the most part, they want to join in on it with us. And that was just an observation that I got from your host. I mean, not your host, but your guest.
Why do you think that is?
Basically, they're not really interested in destroying the system.
of racism, white supremacy, because it's too beneficial. He was indicating something about that whites are victims too. I find that confusing. Maybe somebody can explain that to me a little bit better than what he did on how whites can be victims of the system of racism and at the same time practice it. But the only thing I can figure on why they are kind of like hedging on trying to solve the problems because they don't want it to be solved.
Back of the bus is here as well. I'm sorry for interrupting, sir. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. Constructive program. I agree with 786, your observations, and I suspect the guest was practicing racism today. Many times saying that the white male is a victim of racism, and also stating that there's a tendency by groups to identify themselves and exclude others. But I've observed that white people classify everybody else in the system of racism. Just my observation. I was debating on whether or not to ask him, but he had 30 seconds, or he was heading out the door, so I suspect he would have practiced racism again and used a lot of words and talked about how racism is indicative of everyone, which I think is practicing racism. But I agree with your observation, 786, that white people do not focus on the problem, which is themselves.
Exactly. I commend him as well as I commend most of your guests on their smoothness and their codification, on how smooth and precise it is on the behalf of upholding the system of racism and white supremacy. It's very helpful to me to see the technique and how, I mean, it's almost like an athlete that's been working at a sport all of their lives, which is literally the case. And on how, I mean, you can't do nothing but like I've heard Dr. Wilson say, give him an A+ on it. I mean, it's just so nonchalant, but yet smooth, but yet at the same time precise, and well prepared. And it's something that all non-white victims need to make observations of and develop an understanding of. Yes, sir.
Very consistent, I would say,
yes.
in terms of responses that you hear. Very consistent. You can almost predict certain responses that they're going to give to questions.
Yes.
I'm glad everybody caught that he said Sandra Lang's father was a racist and a victim.
A victim.
That has popped up on this program before. He was only here for an hour. That's why I like having 2 hours, because then I get more time where I can kind of take my time and pick things apart when they say things that don't make sense. But he only gave us an hour, so, I was just kind of trying to get as much information as I could out and take a few calls before the program wrapped up. But, Tim Wise has been here and said that white people are not victims of racism. Admitted racist Tim Wise was here and said white people are not victims of racism. Molly Sakur, admitted racist, was here. White people are not victims of racism. I think we've had several white people who've been here who said that is not accurate at all. I believe Molly Sakur even said that when a white person says another white person is a victim of racism, they are practicing racism. So I'm glad everybody caught that. Pay attention. I'm sure you'll hear other white people saying that, white people are victims of racism too. There was someone else who called in. Hopefully they can share an observation. 704?
Yes.
704?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Greetings all. I've just caught the tail end of the program. I am Reverend Majadi Baruti. I also have a program here on Blog Talk Radio, and brother, I want to say that I have suffered the same program. Mine was with the dates, actually, the same issue with regard to the program. The program that I do, I have a ministry that is dedicated to the African goddess consciousness, or what I call Black Goddess consciousness,
We also, obviously we're going to deal with global white supremacy. I call it global Aryanism, so that I can make sure that everyone is included, everyone that participates, because often we forget those people of Arab descent who first enslaved African people before the European involvement in the slave trade. But you all are right. It is an impossibility because racism is an ism, therefore it is a systematic construct. And that systematic construct is only controlled by one people. That people would be a foolish people to practice it against themselves. So it's an illogical statement to say that they could be victims of something that they cannot be victims of because they are in control of that system. I've heard that, well, white people are victims of racism. I've heard that a million times, and I look at folks like, really? Show me under what construct, what system oppresses them and does harm to them based on racial and ethnic groupings. Show me that system, and then prove, because the burden of proof falls on you now. Prove leave no shadow of a doubt that they are suffering and they're just under this horrifying condition. And we're not talking about, of course, just our physical enslavement, but we're talking about continuous processes, neocolonialism in Africa, the participation of corporations in oppressing groups, so-called third world, actually I call it the first world, nations in West Africa and things of this nature. This is the so-called justice system here in the United States of America. This is a continual process that is a systematic process. So we can't, black folks have got to stop, Africans have got to stop saying we are quick to defend others. As I understand, I believe today is Reconciliation Day in South Africa. I'm talking actually to a friend of mine over in South Africa. And the good sister said, that it is Reconciliation Day. And I'm thinking, for what? What are we reconciling? What did we do in the process of being oppressed? We didn't go
right.
It's an illogical concept to me. Why am I reconciling? You, or this oppressor is the murderer. I'm going to apologize for what? For having my abdomen open so that I could be stabbed? It's not logical. But it is evidence of the intellectual sickness that takes place for victims of racism. It is evidence of that when we take it on ourselves as if we have done it. I'm not, and I adamantly refuse, particularly since I deal with African women's issues and my ministry. I'm the only man that preaches, I actually preach African goddess consciousness or black goddess consciousness. I adamantly refuse to tell my sisters, well, sisters, it's your fault that you're oppressed by global white supremacy and the patriarchy. It's your fault. You did it. Had you not been standing there, then this would not have happened. I'm not going to say that. It will never happen. And I detest any concept that points to that type of thing. So this is a very good program. I think you brothers are brilliant. I've actually never listened to the program, but I've found it through Black Talk Radio. And so this particular program is very good. And I want anything that my ministry is called Wuja Temple. Anything that we can do to support you, we are here for you.
Wow. I appreciate the assistance, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. No. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Thank you for calling in, sir.
All right. Peace and blessings.
Yes, sir. I was hoping everyone also caught I don't know if everybody was here at the beginning of the program. When I asked him first if he was white. He said yes. When I asked or shared my definition of racism, white supremacy, and asked him if he thought it exists, and if that definition was accurate, he said the system exists, yes, but I would not say that I'm white by that definition. Did you all catch when he said that at the beginning of the program?
I wasn't able to listen at the beginning, fortunately.
Okay.
I wasn't listening. I wasn't able to listen at the beginning either.
Okay.
But on your caption on the website, I think you had written in that he did not think that there was a global system of racism and white supremacy. Am I correct?
You are correct, sir.
Okay. I noticed that part. So Just one more observation. It's interesting because as victims, we're trying to build this apparatus. We're trying to build this apparatus that will one day render the system of white supremacy null and void. And these people who identify themselves as being white are so expert at maintaining maintaining the system of racial white supremacy. All they have to do is just one slight prick, and they're able to wiggle themselves out of a direct question. So it just emboldens me to continue on to keep sharpening my codification. Because for the most part, the only thing that I see that's useful out of a white person is to obtain as much information possible from them. Because as I've heard you say, I don't see anywhere where they are any seriousness about rendering the system of racist white supremacy null and void. I don't see any sincerity in it at all. You know, in my eyesight. And your show is placing more and more proof to that. You know, from myself to myself anyway, as far as listening to your show, and I listen to your show a lot.
Oh, thank you for checking it out.
Very helpful. Yeah, very helpful what you're doing and your strategy on why you invite guests who identify themselves as being white. It's very, very helpful. Very helpful. So keep with that strategy.
Thank you, sir. I hope it's worthy of your time and energy. I didn't mean to interrupt you back at the bus. Sorry about that.
I was saying it is indeed. I agree with 786. I also observed when you mentioned the part in the story when the non-white offspring was given the doll with blonde hair and blue eyes. Mm-hmm. The white person said he believed that was just a nostalgic action, something to I guess promote her memories. I thought that was pretty clowning. I mean, and you brought it up again, and you said, "Oh, well, I just thought it was nostalgic," and he understood you saying you saw it as both a manifestation of basically mistreatment. Mm-hmm. But I thought that was pretty clowning on the white person's part.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody has watched this film. It is online. If you haven't seen it, it's online. I think it's pretty interesting. If you're not familiar with so-called Apartheid South Africa, gives you a really nice sense of how racism, white supremacy worked and continues to work in that area of the world. And the scene with the doll. I don't even know how to. You just have to watch the film to catch it. I was thinking, oh wow, maybe she's saved up a lot of money because her parents did have money. So I was like, maybe she saved up a lot of money for it. And she's gonna come through at the end of the day and help her out, and it'll things will be better and right on, or something of some value. And it was this little blonde doll, just like, are you serious? Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, and I've seen that strategy a lot from white people where they will concede your point. He didn't say that I was incorrect. He said he conceded, yes, what you're saying, correct. But they will do that a lot. They will agree with your point and then deviate and try and go down another road. I've even talked with Yellow Manny, and I spoke with a suspected racist, and he was talking about a non-white person that he knew who was stopped by enforcement officials. And the non-white person said, I think he was being racist. And this white person said, well, he could have been, but, and he gave, a list of 20 other things, that it could have been. And, the non-white person's like, well, yeah, maybe it was that. Yeah, maybe he was just having a bad day. Yeah, maybe. And it ends up being all these other possibilities except racism, which everybody had agreed, yeah, maybe he was just being racist. Consistent tactic I have observed from white people.
Masterful. Yes.
They are.
Yeah.
619. Are you? I messed up. 619. Are you there?
Yes, I am here, but I was just listening. because I'm actually not, I'm out in a public sphere and it'll probably be too much background noise. But I didn't get to hear the show really. I was hoping that your guest was still there, but apparently he's gone.
Yeah, he would only do an hour for us, so we did the hour, and he has left the building.
Okay. Well, I'll have to listen to it on archives. It doesn't sound like he was very courteous.
I can't say he was discourteous on the show. I think he's a white person, and he's got better things to do with his time than chat with Negroes about racism. So he was willing to concede an hour. I can't say he was not courteous, but I can't say he was willing to do all that he could to work against racism, white supremacy. So we worked with what we got.
Hey, just in case I don't get in touch with you, I'm going to send you an email. I have something I have to ask you that's extremely important before my show on Sunday. So
yes, ma'am.
Just please check your email. But it sounds like you guys are having a constructive conversation, so I'll just listen.
Oh, okie dokie. If you want to chat, throw one up. It's all good. We have plugged your show several times. I'll plug it again now that you're here. Or you can do it. You want to do it?
Oh, you're much better at it.
Okie dokie. I'll plug it. This Sunday, our caller, Cree, counter-racist evolving engineer, she will be here Sunday, December 20th. It will be 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central, 10 a.m. Pacific. Counter-racist evolving engineer. She will be discussing this very same film, Skin. She will have British film reviewer Nathan Coblent. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. They'll be in the house on Sunday to discuss this film. They'll be talking about whether or not... I'm sorry? Oh, I had some background noise. Counter-racist evolving engineer. She will be discussing with Nathan Koblenitz whether or not Sandra Lang's mother perhaps had a non-white father, whether she had an affair, and other aspects of racist white supremacy in this film. So again, Sunday, December 20th, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific here. The other folks listening in on the line, I don't know if you had other observations about this program or anything else that you wanted to share racism related.
Just another lesson learned, again, that white people, even white people that will speak with you about specifically racism, white supremacy, they will not be as helpful as they could be, and they're not going to stop. It's what they do. This is their hobby, their life work, their survival system. It's just what it is. So we've got to modify our thought, speech, and action. And recon, as 786 said, the cow is a valuable resource. Just seeing how white people function, listening to the words they use, how they answer questions, how their behavior changes. Constructive program. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Back of the Bus, as always. Mr. 786, did you have any other observations or racism-related comments?
Well, the lady that just came on, she brought up she brought the question out about was the white person courteous, and what came to my mind was on how even the advent of being courteous is used as a strategy by people who classify themselves as white, and it's a very available one because from the standpoint of you not going through any type of psychological or physical suffering or contamination of any type, it's quite easy for you to be courteous. And I've seen it constantly through most of my life being used as a tool in order to maintain the system of racism and white supremacy. And now that we're in a period of time that is very refined, it is a very, very effective tool. I'd say it's a tool on their behalf because that's what it appears to be to me.
Being courteous, you mean?
Yes, sir. Being super courteous.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it has been effective at further confusing the non-white person. I appreciate for a non-white a white person, like I've heard a few on your program, to in discourse to be kind of abrasive. I appreciate that more because that gives me more of an understanding of a person being authentic. You know, and then again, as far as even if a white person is courteous, the global atmosphere is set to whereas it's easy for them to be courteous. You know, under the conditions is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's just an observation that I've had. You know, with your guests that's been coming on, mainly the white. But I do believe that it's appropriate for non-white people in their discourse and interaction, especially with other non-white people, to be as courteous as possible.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, particularly with non-white people. Be as courteous as possible.
Yes.
I don't care if they insult you. In fact, you should expect them to be discourteous, rude, curt. You should expect them to call you everything but a child of God. If you attempt to speak about racism, white supremacy, part of your rock-solid code has got to be, I am going to be as courteous to this victim of racism as I possibly can be, and when I can no longer be courteous, the discussion is over.
Right. I'm learning that on a daily basis myself personally. I'm learning to have the most courteous discourse as possible, especially with a non-white person.
For sure. If I'm going to be rude with anybody, I'm going to be rude with a white person. And even then, I try not to be rude with them because white people can put a hurting on you. So I try to be courteous with everyone. But if I absolutely got to feel like I need to get rowdy in a discussion of racism, it's going to be with a white person. I feel like that's one of the worst things you can do is to get, rude and loud with another victim. 'Cause, I mean, that just happens every day. That's not even, anything special. That's us every day. And I think Mr. Fuller and Dr. Welsing, I think, are both excellent examples.
Very helpful.
I've never heard either one of them get rowdy with a non-white person. I've heard non-white people be extremely rude when talking with them.
They literally give me strength in that subject matter because like you said, I've heard them in some discourse that was like, "What? You're not going to say anything to that?" But yet, what they have to say in such a calm, level fashion is even stronger than whatever a good cussing out can possibly give to that person. You know, the calm, precise language or silence, because you don't answer statements for one thing, and so even some questions, it would be to the best interest not to even answer. And they are what as close as the expert as I can accredit to a non-white person on that subject matter. And I have found over my years on this planet that there's nothing constructive that comes out of it when non-white people are arguing and debating each other, especially over the subject of racism and white supremacy.
For sure. And I
thank you for your program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I definitely, like I said, one of the things I would also tell people, keep in mind, if you're talking with a non-white person, Mr. Fuller said this, keep in mind, we're supposed to be solving problems. I would definitely pay attention. Does this conversation sound like I'm just trying to prove that this other person is incorrect, that they're wrong in what they're saying?
In an argument, yes.
Exactly. Yes. Am I trying to win an argument, or are we trying to replace white supremacy with justice? Keep that in mind, because I have observed a lot of conversations with non-white people where it's really evolved more, or I'll say it's really regressed to, I'm just trying to win an argument. This is no longer about replace white supremacy with justice and helping each other out. This is just, I'm trying to show that I'm right and you're wrong. And I just haven't seen where that's constructive. I could be incorrect, but I would keep that in mind in discussions with non-white people. Yeah, and in fact, I agree with what is it 786? Am I getting your error code correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, 786. I agree with what he said. When you can remain calm when you speak with other non-white people, that can be some of the most effective counter-racist work. And if I could point you to an example, the second time Mr. Fuller was on the Cows, the August 1st program,
I heard it. Yes, sir.
A non-white caller called in. Do you, Mr. 786, do you feel like that was a great illustration of what happens when you stay calm?
Oh man, I call him every now and then, but to hear him at work, it is so beneficial. It makes a world of difference with me. As far as that being a viable, constructive code that all of us, I mean, we just gotta adopt that code as far as that's concerned, because it makes a world of difference to keep down confusion that exists amongst us. And I mean, because collectively so far with us, we're so lacking in codification, and we're like a bottle of pills with no directions on them at all. Every day is an adventure. Every day is an adventure. But if we can just put into our own personal codification that I am not going to get into a heated argument in the barbershop, at my mother's home, or anywhere else with another non-white person, it'll make a world of difference with us. It'll make a world of difference. If we just adopt that into our personal codification, and like you did say, and I agree with you, they are very, those two individuals, out of any non-white person I have ever met or heard, they have shown that example. They've shown that example. There were several other occasions on your program that I've heard Mr. Fuller, where another non-white person called, picking a fight, picking a fight with them and whatnot. Like I said before, he really helps me out. He really helps me out as far as that concerned.
Me too. Yeah, I wholeheartly endorse that. Yeah, just don't fuss with non-white people. If you listen to that program, like I said, the second time Mr. Fuller was here, but the dynamic that I observed, the non-white person who called in, who said she was happy, eventually sounded like she was not happy at all. And Mr. Fuller sounded pretty much the same as when he first called the show. He was not yelling. He wasn't cursing. He was still being courteous. No, ma'am. No, no, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Being quiet, letting her ask her question. She was getting, like, you could even hear her breathing heavier on the phone as the program.
And generally, we don't even know what happiness means. There's no way to quantify that terminology in this world. Happiness. You have all of this during this time of year right now. You have all of this fake phoniness going on, over this quote unquote holiday season, as though something has been put on pause. The mistreatment has been put on pause, and now is the time to concentrate on being happy. There's no way to quantify that in this world, and from the victim standpoint, it's kind of like a shot of Novocaine. A shot of Novocaine designed to kind of like make you forget about this global mistreatment that's going on during this time of year, or ignore it, and then have some kind of frivolous, counterproductive activity going on. And for the most part, as what I did for a living before I retired as a fireman, the mistreatment goes on and on and on. Because I mean, during this time of year, it was known that the call level steps up during that time. During this time, because now more so that we're not on these gigs that these little gigs that we have. We're now more up in each other's face, and there's alcohol that's in the environment, or drugs, or what have you, and we have the opportunity now, instead of to lay this back on the system of racism and white supremacy, we dumping on each other.
For sure. agree wholeheartedly. I'm trying to see if I can pull the show off dealing with the Christmas holiday before all that passes. So hopefully that'll happen. Stay tuned. I'm working on that in the background. We'll see if that pans out.
Okay.
Very important, and I'm hoping we can do that here at the Cows before the season wraps up. I definitely, again, program tomorrow, William Pepper, very important. Please make sure you check that one out. I definitely wanted to remind the folks, as I said, last program, I'm very serious about this. No kidding, no joking. Context of white supremacy. I have every intention of retiring August 5th, 2010. Is somebody on speakerphone? There's a lot of background distortion now. Somebody on speakerphone or? Okay, it disappeared. I'll go again. As I said last program, I have every intention of retiring on August 5th, 2010, unless I get a MacBook, brand new with carrying case, by August 5th, 2010. It is very difficult for me to do these programs as I have no phone, no computer. I have gotten some assistance from dedicated victims of white supremacy, but I really need a MacBook, brand new. Someone asked me last program, does it have to be a MacBook? MacBooks are real white. The white people who put these together, these are great machines. I would prefer a MacBook. Now, if I get a brand new laptop or a functional laptop before August 5th, 2010, I'll say that'll buy you some time. If I get if I get a laptop functional by August 5th, 2010, I will stay on until the end of 2010. But I want a MacBook. They say beggars can't be choosers. No. I'm making a request, and I'm making a very specific request. If the program is constructive, the individuals who find it constructive, be they victims or white people, if you think this is a constructive effort to replace white supremacy with justice, get some white people to get the resources to get me a MacBook Pro. They're not even that expensive. That's not even $2,000. I mean, really. That's crumbs for white people. So MacBook, August 5th, 2010, or I'm retiring, and I'm very comfortable doing so. If anybody thinks the program is constructive, see what you can do to help out in that regard. If you don't think the program is constructive, don't worry about it. Don't lose any sleep about it. But I'm very serious about that. I'll continue to announce. But August 5th, 2010, I don't have a MacBook Pro or a laptop. The Cows is over, and I can sleep easy on that one. Again, we'll be back tomorrow. William Pepper, very much looking forward to that program. I hope everybody was able to catch Dr. Welsing last week. That was, I normally don't say constructive, but I think that was real constructive when Dr. Welsing was on the program last Friday. I hope everybody got an opportunity to catch that. And Charles Mills. Charles Mills had some real good stuff to share on Sunday. And he was from, I didn't even know he was from Jamaica with the super Jamaican accent. That was real cool to have him on the show this past Sunday. I hope everybody was able to catch the archives for both of those programs. Mr. Back of the Bus, if you're there, did you have anything you want to share before we wrap up?
No, sir. Just replace white supremacy with justice immediately, and I'm out.
Outstanding. Back of the Bus. Please check his blog, nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. One more time, that is nonwhitealliance.wordpress.com. Very constructive website, lots of good information. I actually brokered a show from his blog, just reading some of the posts, and that should be coming next month. Again, Cree, please check our program coming up this Sunday, December 20th. It will be at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 Central, 10 a.m. Pacific. She will have Nathan Koblenitz on the program, British film reviewer. That'll be this Sunday. 786, did you have anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Okay, use bathroom.
Oh, I think he's talking to someone else. 786.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
sir. Did you have anything you want to say before we wrap the program?
Oh, no, sir. No, sir. I'm just, I'm signing off myself. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you, everybody who called in. I hope you found the program constructive. Oh, that was one thing I wanted to say. It is in the show description. Mr. 786 pointed it out. It is in the show description for this program. Anthony Fabian has been on other programs here at Blog Talk Radio. In fact, that's how I found out about him. He was on a program this summer, and he was asked by the host, do you think there's a global system of racism, white supremacy? And he said no. If you have the time and interest, I would encourage folks, check out that program. I think that if you listen to what he said on this show, even in 60 Minutes, and you listen to what he said on that program, I think he was there for longer than an hour. He was there for closer to 2 hours. Contrast those two programs. I think the difference that you will find, the non-white person who hosts that show, I suspect is not as informed about racism, white supremacy, and it shows big time in what they talked about, the focus of the program, and how Mr. Fabian responded to her. Contrast those two programs, check them out, listen to what he said there, compare it to what he said here. Very interesting difference in the two programs, and I think it comes down to that non-white person, I suspect, is still pretty confused about racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. I could be incorrect, and please keep in mind, I'm still working this out myself. I'm still confused. I'm still a victim of white supremacy also. But that's just my tidbit. Check those out and see what the contrast is. And I also wanted to share when Dick Lair was on the program a few weeks ago, he was saying about suggestions for non-white people, or just suggestions in general to replace white supremacy with justice. I think as long as there are hordes of non-white people who are confused about racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, the suggestions are not really going to pan out. They're not going to have an effective result because you're not going to have people who are hearing the suggestions who are going to understand and implement them. I think the biggest problem right now is that you do not have enough non-white people who understand we are in a system of white supremacy and understand what that means. I just don't see that you have enough non-white people who have a solid grasp of that. And as long as that's the case, suggestions just aren't going to do a whole lot. I think the biggest thing to do right now is to really make a concerted effort to inform as many non-white people about racism, white supremacy accurately so that they really grasp what it means. White supremacy, not Klan, not skinheads, global system where white people control every aspect of people activity worldwide. Really get an understanding of what that means and how that plays out in your life. Until that happens, I mean, Mr. Fuller has made suggestions, Dr. Welsing has made suggestions, even Jessica Pettit the first time she was here, admitted racist, made suggestions. Until you have enough non-white people who understand the importance of those suggestions and why those suggestions make sense in a system of white supremacy, not going to add up to anything. I could be incorrect, but I think that is accurate. Think about it, marinate. We'll be back tomorrow with Mr. William Pepper, active state. Hopefully it will be a constructive program on the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be back. Please check the blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com. One more time, racism-notes.blogspot.com. Context of White Supremacy, signing off. Thank you.